Ed Balls, not me, who said that one of their tax plans, abolishing the non-dom status, could actually cost the country money. But let's for a moment leave that argument about lost investment to one side. £2 billion is nowhere near the kind of scale of tax revenues that Labour needs to raise. If they want to meet the terms of the Charter for Budget Responsibility that they voted for this January and balance the current budget by 2017-18 and do half of it through tax, as Ed Miliband suggested, then they need £15 billion of tax rises, and that is £3,000 per working family over the Parliament. And that means incomes hit and jobs lost. That brings me to my third observation. What about the impact on businesses, the creator of jobs, of an Ed Miliband SNP government? Well, what do we know? We know that this is the first time since 1973 that any political party has proposed increasing the main rate of corporation tax. And there's a reason why no recent Labour Party, not the party of Neil Kinnock or Michael Foot or, of course, Tony Blair, proposed it. Because in the modern world, an increase in Britain's corporation tax would be noticed all around the world, and it would send the clearest negative signal about how welcoming our country is to business and to investment. And that has been the clear message from the leaders of British business, large and small, in this election campaign, when they wrote their letter warning that a change in course will threaten jobs and deter investment. Now, these were not the usual suspects. They included the leaders of some of the biggest companies in the world, business leaders who have never spoken out before, or when they have spoken out in support of the Labour Party in the past. And when you look not just at the rhetoric about producers and predators, but the commitments on increasing business taxes, reversing our employment tribunal reforms, or the policies proposed to restrict the sale of a business, you can see why the business community sees this Labour leadership as profoundly anti-business and anti-jobs. This week, the economists at Goldman Sachs, that's a bank that isn't British, isn't known for being remotely sentimental or biased to any party, and is renowned for its rigorous analysis, said this in its recent analysis of the British political situation. Domestically orientated small companies are particularly exposed to the regulatory implications of a leftward shift in government. In other words, Britain's small businesses would be hit under Ed Miliband and the SNP. And the consequences of that regulation and those business taxes and the employment market inflexibility would be lost jobs. Instead of moving towards full employment, as we're doing today under our plan, we will be moving towards unemployment. And that brings me to my fourth and my final observation. It's about the fundamental issue of stability, economic stability and political stability. Now, all the opinion polls show this election is clearly very close. But one thing the polls also clearly show is that the SNP looks set to take a very large number of seats in Scotland, principally off the Labour Party. And the result is that it has become impossible for the Labour Party to win an outright majority. Ed Miliband will only be able to govern entirely dependent on Scottish nationalists. Now, what do we know about the approach the SNP will take to that government? Well, we know they won't enter a coalition. They've made it clear that they will negotiate their support on each and every parliamentary vote. This is a world away from the stable arrangements we have today. Don't be fooled into thinking that all hung parliaments are like this one we have just had. So we have a recipe for daily political instability. Every vote, every budget resolution, every clause of every piece of legislation up for grabs every single day. What else do we know about the Scottish nationalist approach? Now, their undoubted, constantly stated goal is to secure maximum resources for Scotland and to create the conditions for independence. And their first goal is securing another majority in the Scottish Parliament elections next year. So they have every possible incentive to prove their credentials by holding an Ed Miliband government to near constant ransom, extracting every additional pound they can for Scotland, breeding resentment on both sides of the border, and doing everything they can to make the UK government look weak and shambolic. And that provides them with the perfect backdrop for success in the Scottish Parliament elections and a springboard for another referendum. I don't often agree with Gordon Brown, but he was right when he said last night that this would mean constitutional chaos. So what is the economic cost of this chaotic instability at the heart of the British government? Investment would be put off due to uncertainty about the direction of government policy. Businesses would delay decisions to expand and to take new people on, and the cost of borrowing would rise too. Lift our heads from the day-to-day political battle and listen to what the leading market economists and investors around the world are saying right now about the British election. Their professional judgments on the prospects for our economy are chilling, and millions of British people will pay the price. The US investment bank, Morgan Stanley, says that a minority Labour-led government supported by the SNP would likely lead to a sell-off of an increased uncertainty and the potential for an earlier interest rate rise. BlackRock, they're the world's biggest investment and pension fund, say that buyers would demand higher risk premia on our debt, in other words, higher interest rates. CIBC, which is one of Canada's largest banks, have warned that a Labour government supported by the SNP would lead to a dangerous cocktail where taxes are going up, spending is going up, and interest rates are going up. And Deutsche Bank, the largest German bank, says that the SNP could encourage Labour to move further to the left in government, and one consequence could be higher short and longer-term interest rates as markets reassess the UK's willingness to accumulate sovereign debt. Now, you won't have heard any of this in the coverage of our election this week, but these are not the idle musings from the ill-informed. These are the acute observations from the largest participants in global financial markets who make it their business to forecast interest rate changes. So the message from the independent observers of Britain is clear. An Ed Miliband SNP government means higher interest rates than would otherwise be the case. And that means higher mortgage rates for families and higher loan rates for businesses. So let me tell you about the Miliband SNP sums. Some people will be out of a job. Some people will pay higher taxes. Some people will see their mortgage bills rise, and everybody will be worse off. For there is a real human consequence to political instability and economic chaos. It's why Britain stands at a fork in the road. We can either continue on the path to prosperity with David Cameron's strong leadership and our balanced plan for a brighter, more secure future, or we can choose the alternative of a Miliband SNP government. Political instability leading to economic chaos, jobs lost, mortgage rates higher, family incomes lower, competence or chaos. That represents the real economic choice facing the country. And with 2 weeks to polling day, it's time to focus on it, for the stakes for our country's future could not be higher. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, thank you. We've got time for a few questions. I'm also going to take first the questions from some of the people from the media who are here as well, but then we'll take questions from everyone else as well. James Landell from the BBC.
Good morning, Chancellor. James Landell from the BBC. The IFS says that you and other parties are leaving the electorate in the dark over the scale of the spending cuts you plan. Is now not the moment for you to be honest and open with the voters and say precisely what you're going to do?
Well, people know from us we have a balanced and clear plan to eliminate the deficit, to invest in our National Health Service, and to make work pay for working people, which is exactly what we have done over the last 5 years. But what the IFS have also confirmed today is that Labour would borrow at least £90 billion more, and that in the words of the IFS, that would leave the British government less well-placed to deal with future adverse effects. In other words, we'd be more exposed to the economic storms. Now, Britain has been through those economic storms before. We don't want to go through them again. And so we face this choice in our country. It's a choice coming in 2 weeks' time. Do we get straight back to work on an economic plan that is working under David Cameron, or do we have the profound instability of a Miliband SNP government borrowing more, as confirmed today by the IFS, and a dangerous cocktail of higher interest rates, higher mortgage rates, lost jobs and lost incomes? And that is the choice on the ballot paper in 2 weeks' time.
But the IFS says very specifically, they're talking, under your plans, 18% cuts to unprotected departments. That is the police, that is the courts, that is transport, that is defence, that is care. Do you not owe it to the British electorate to be more specific about what you're planning to do to those areas of spending? You yourself said moments ago, and I would quote you, the public are owed a clear explanation of the choices on offer. You are at the moment not offering that choice.
I think people know what they get from David Cameron and the Conservatives. They get clear economic leadership. They get stable government. They get a plan that's delivering more jobs. They get a plan that is getting our public finances into balance and therefore making our country more secure. And you can see the benefit in a country that is growing faster than almost any other major advanced economy in the world. And what we've got to do is continue for the next 2 years at the same pace the savings we've made over the last 5 years, and people can see how that has restored stability to our country. The alternative of that Miliband SNP government would be deeply unstable. It would borrow tens of billions of pounds